We designed AeroDinosaur as a one-stop, informative, and experience-centric channel, covering heavy piston-powered commercial prop liners that represented the state-of-the-art from the 1930s into the early 1960s, as well as military aircraft powered by variants of the same engines. In most of our videos, we also feature rare, inside and out, full audio footage of operations of the few remaining aircraft in these categories up to this day. In the future, vintage propliner contemporaries such as the Lockheed L-188 Electra may be considered as subjects for this channel. When on our channel homepage, please click on Videos from the choices at the top to see the full range of our video offerings. Also, if you click on Playlists on that same bar, you will find in one place our library of quality propliner and heavy piston videos from other YouTube creators. And of course, don't forget the subscribe button. We'd also like to mention our upcoming video series here on AeroDinosaur channel we call The Poor Man's Hangar Tour. In this series, we delve into the power evolution of U.S. heavy radial power plants and the aircraft they powered from the 1930s through the so-called overdevelopment of engines and airframes in the 1950s before the dawn of the jet age. We start with the earliest lower-powered engines and move forward in time to the last high-powered variants of the same engines used decades later. Since we're too poor to own any airplanes or hangars, we resort to utilizing our lifetime scale replica collection as a starting point for each discussion. The models as presented will be liberally complemented with photographs and video footage of the actual engines and aircraft under discussion, making this truly an experience-centric poor man's hangar tour. We'll also compare the big radials to competing liquid-cooled V12 engines of the period, including Rolls-Royce, Daimler-Benz, and Allison engines, and the big Bristol radials out of the UK. In doing this, we quickly find our discussions cannot be limited to any single aircraft category, such as military versus commercial, or fighters versus propliners. All are intertwined in this evolution and cannot be separated. The earliest monster radial engines typically started life in military fighters, bombers, and transports, and with continuous improvement and evolution over the 2 decades, found their way into commercial airliners and their military transport and surveillance counterparts as a stopgap for jet-age technology. We hope you enjoy our different perspective on the piston aero engines and aircraft of the mid-20th century, and we look forward to bringing this to life for you. Hi, John Reed, AeroDinosaur. This program features operational footage of an extremely rare and now one-off aircraft taken at an event at the Spirit of St. Louis Airport in West St. Louis County, Missouri in June 2022. Our subject is that of a former U.S. Coast Guard Consolidated PB4Y-2G privateer, sometimes referred to under its later P4Y-2 designation. This footage is of the only remaining PB4Y-2 in operation out of the 736 built in 1944 and 1945. The privateer was a derivative of the Consolidated B-24 Liberator bomber of World War II. In general, the privateer saw some serious naval action at the very end of World War II and was operated well into the post-war years, mostly in more benign roles with both the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard, with exceptions. The privateer has received little recognition for its major contributions to maritime forces during and after the war. As is usual with our AeroDinosaur channel, we always first go through a basic ground school of sorts for a broad summary of every aircraft we feature. Then, current day operational video is almost always featured in our programs, including this one for sure. Our subscribers know that AeroDinosaur steers away from common video program formats that show nothing but repeated flyby clips with no background detail or minimal background detail on the aircraft that they're staring at. We've found that our audience seems to be in the upper 10% or so of historical aviation literacy and always wants the background on our subject aircraft in order to better understand and more greatly appreciate the operational footage we present. Many viewers undoubtedly know much more about our featured aircraft than we do, including the privateer highlighted here, but nobody knows everything, so even they still might learn something today, just like we always learn many new things when we receive your constructive feedback and comments. For viewers wanting significantly greater detail on the PB4Y-2 and its history and technology, we recommend the following 3 excellent books. This one by Nick Veronico and Steve Ginter emphasizes mainly technical details, and this one by Alan C. Carey emphasizes mainly operational details of this aircraft. And this one, by Alan C. Carey as well, covers the combat operations of both the Navy Liberator and privateers with the bombing squadron VB/VPB-109 in the South Pacific in World War II. As I mentioned, the Consolidated PB4Y-2 privateer was a major derivative of the Consolidated B-24 Liberator bomber. As most of our viewers know, the B-24 was part of the triad of 3 heavy high-altitude strategic bombers that had a significant role with the U.S. Army Air Force in defeating Germany and Japan in World War II. The other 2 bombers we all know were the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress and the later Boeing B-29 Superfortress. We're not covering the main details of World War II B-24 operations today, but we'll do so in much greater detail, as well as climb in to fly in one in our upcoming Poor Man's Hangar Tour series. In 1942, the Navy needed an anti-shipping platform. As a stopgap measure, they received an allocation of B-24Ds with the blessing of a reluctant U.S. Army Air Force in 1942. The 8 Browning 50 caliber machine guns were retained, and specialized equipment for naval operations was added to the aircraft, including new Urco gun turrets, where the nose turret was rounder and more compact than that of the Army version. The new Navy Liberator was now designated as the PB4Y-1. 8,000 pounds of bombs, torpedoes, and/or mines could also be carried. With 1,174 PB4Y-1s ultimately delivered to the Navy during the war, they immediately went into battle in the Atlantic and South Pacific on solo radar evading low-altitude strafing missions at masthead height. They scored notable anti-submarine, anti-shipping, and land target victories, unfortunately racking up expected aircraft and crew losses, of course. I'd like to emphasize that these were normally solo attacks with one plane engaging the target at a time, and not higher altitude formation attacks characteristic of the U.S. Army Air Force. The Navy Liberator was also widely used in the photo reconnaissance role, especially in post-war service. While the U.S. Army Air Force retired the majority of their B-24s immediately after the war due to the superior B-29 Superfortress heavy bomber then in inventory, the U.S. Navy held on to many of their PB4Y-1s for another decade. This is a scale replica I built of the PB4Y-1 in its post-war configuration. This one was with Photographic Squadron 62, designated VJ-62, involved in aerial mapping. This depicts the plane before the guns were removed, as they were unnecessary for mapping in peacetime. This very plane, number 14, was among the last two Liberators to see U.S. military service, retiring in August 1955, only 7 months after I was born. The B-24 and PB4Y-1 were powered by the 1,200 horsepower Pratt & Whitney 14-cylinder twin Wasp radial engine, which had the standard mechanical supercharging for power, but was also externally turbocharged with exhaust pressure for altitude. This was virtually the same engine that powered the DC-3 and C-47 transports that were mechanically or internally supercharged only. However, getting back to 1942, you'll recall that I mentioned that the PB4Y-1 was a stopgap measure. As they were first being delivered to the Navy, work on a significant derivative of this plane that would be more suitable for naval operations was underway, designated PB4Y-2. Consensus seems to be that the privateer did not actually enter the naval combat theaters until January 1945, only 7 months before the war in the Pacific ended. This new aircraft retained the Liberator's wing, landing gear, and fuselage profile, but the fuselage was lengthened by 7 feet forward of the wing, and the twin tails were replaced with a very large single tail fin. A higher 1,350 horsepower version of the R-1830 Double Wasp, the R-1830-94, was utilized, and the external turbochargers were deleted, as with the stock DC-3 or C-47, as all naval operations were at low altitude. Because of the new engine configuration and other considerations, the Liberator's elliptical engine package was rotated 90 degrees. That is, the wide part of the ellipse was rotated from the horizontal plane to the vertical. This appeared to make the privateer appear more aerodynamically clean, but it probably didn't matter that much. Also, the number of 50 caliber guns was up from 8 to 12 guns in 6 turrets, including 2 hugely bulging turrets at the waist gun positions at the rear half of the fuselage. The privateer performed the very same roles as the naval Liberator in the battle theaters, but the war ended before the late arriving privateers could have the same impact on the war's outcome. 736 privateers were delivered before production was stopped at war's end. The Navy privateers continued operating in the post-war Cold War period, as did the Navy Liberators, in roles of maritime weather reconnaissance where they penetrated to the eyes of hurricanes and typhoons, and also performed flare dropping for night ground attack aircraft operations in Korea. Another key role was electronic intelligence gathering, or ELINT, that's E-L-I-N-T, where one privateer was unfortunately shot down by Russian fighters over the Baltic Sea region in 1950. Privateers also performed a number of other ancillary roles, too numerous to cover here. A few privateers were also operated by the French Navy in Indochina, as well as the Taiwanese and Honduran militaries. Beginning in the mid-1950s, the U.S. Navy began phasing out their privateers in favor of the more powerful Lockheed P-2V Neptunes and Martin P-4M Mercators. They phased out all their privateers by the early 1960s, and most went to the boneyard at Litchfield Park, Arizona, where many were stripped of their engines and scrapped. At that time, the privateers' higher-powered R-1830-94s were a hot item, with DC-3 and C-47 rebuilders and refurbishers such as Stuart Davis and Remmert Werner, who were snapping up these engines for their so-called Super DC-3 high-end corporate conversions. Several of the PB4Y-2s were declared surplus for firebomber use and could carry and airdrop up to 2,500 gallons of fire retardant. In addition to all this, between 1946 and 1958, the U.S. Coast Guard operated up to 13 privateers out of Barbers Point, Hawaii, and San Francisco, mainly in the search and rescue role. These were modified with a framed clear observation nose in the place of the nose turret, as well as large framed plexiglass observation windows replacing the bulging waist gun turrets, among other less obvious modifications. All other guns and turrets were also removed and sheet metaled over. These modified Coast Guard privateers were designated PB4Y-2Gs. After their retirement in 1958, most of these Coast Guard planes were also declared surplus and also fell into civilian hands to become mostly firebomber conversions, many passing on through a string of operators into the late 1960s. By then, the primary firebombing operation with the -2G privateers was Avery Aviation out of Graybull, Wyoming, who owned 5 of them, but only 1 or 2 were active at any one time. However, overhaul costs for the now more scarce -94 R-1830s were skyrocketing and now costing up to $13,000 per engine, and a solution had to be found. More powerful, zero-timed B-25 engines, which were Curtiss-Wright R-2600s, were available for only $500. So, there was an opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Avery Aviation came up with a supplemental type certificate, or STC, to re-engine the 2Gs with complete 1,600 horsepower R2600 engine packages, also known as Quick Engine Change, or QEC packages, right off the wings of the B-25, which were plentiful, representing nearly a 20% power increase. Both the 1830 Twin Wasp and the 2600 Double Cyclone are similarly configured 14-cylinder radials with 2 rows of 7 cylinders each. A single cylinder or jug of the original R-1830 was 131 cubic inches, whereas a single R-2600 jug was 186 cubic inches. Also, the framed forward flight deck windscreen was replaced by a cleaner single-piece bubble windshield. So, the privateer now became known as the super privateer in some circles, but most just still refer to it as the privateer. By 1970, all 5 of Avery's privateers were modified with this STC, giving the planes a retardant capacity increase from 2,500 gallons, or 15,000 pounds, to 3,000 gallons, or 18,000 pounds, as well as plenty of excess power for more precise fire drops and high-G pullouts in the typically hilly and mountainous geography where wildfires were common. At that time, Avery came under the new corporate ownership of 2 key employees after Avery's owner passed away, and became Hawkins and Powers Aviation, who for the next 2.5 decades would operate the 5 super privateers, of which 1 was unfortunately lost in a 2002 fatal accident. Hawkins and Powers also operated converted Fairchild C-119s, Douglas DC-6s, Lockheed P-2V Neptunes, Lockheed P3 Orion turboprops, and Lockheed C-130 turboprops, among others, in the firebombing role. While Hawkins and Powers was well known and had an impeccable reputation in the wildfire fighting arena, that 2002 privateer crash, which was caused by a wing structural failure, was their second such crash within several weeks, that time involving one of their C-130s under near-identical wing failure circumstances. This put the wheels in motion for the federal government and the U.S. Forest Service to take action to fully ban the use of obsolete heavy piston iron for firebombing. This would result in Hawkins and Powers having to wind down and auction off whatever they could during the first decade of the 2000s. Many of you know that during this process, one of their C-119s was pulled for use in the 2004 remake of the 1965 movie Flight of the Phoenix, starring Dennis Quaid in place of Jimmy Stewart's pilot character in the original movie. As I mentioned, in 2008, one of the ex-Hawkins and Powers privateers, November 2871 Golf, fell into the hands of warbird rebuilder GossHawk Unlimited out of Casa Grande, Arizona. This is our subject aircraft, originally with the U.S. Coast Guard in the post-war era. GossHawk performed work on the plane to keep it airworthy and since had painted it in the original Coast Guard colors while retaining the Hawkins and Powers logo on the nose in honor of them. The plane is owned by two investment companies and has been flown to select air shows by GossHawk crews since around 2015 or so.
Ground school, fly in the day, and then they stay in a hotel and they have financial literacy and business classes. These are bright future stars. So thank you guys, I'm proud of you. Back to you, Phil.
Thank you, Jeremy. The Rental Cadet Program is a 6-week immersive flight training experience designed to introduce students.
Subject of a little summer movie you may have heard of, Top Gun Maverick, Tom Cruise, my Hollywood connection. We have a lot here for you today. The STEM XO, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Enrichment Program for young innovators. Great session here today. That's the partnership with AeroDinosaur. It's a great program for young Have a good time today. Stay hydrated. Enjoy the exhibits. Have fun. And take a picture and post them on social media. Tag St. Louis County. Show your friends around the country what a good time you're having in St. Louis County today. Welcome back. Thank you very much.
We will today to be here again. We want to thank you. Let's go. Class
prove the Navy has successfully used the B-24 Liberator or PB4Y to drive the air. As we watch these historic aircraft in flight, right now we're going to listen to the beautiful sights and sounds of that Rolls-Royce Merlin-powered Super.